Alright, we are pulling up to RS Garage because today we're going to be building my FD Pro 2JZ engine with Jay from RS Garage. So he put together Adam's engine, and we're going to be basing everything I'm doing off of a tried and true program from Adam's FD program, and I'm getting my first stroker motor. I am so freaking pumped, and we're going to be assembling it today, which I've never done. I am going into this brand new. I've never put together a JZ engine. I really didn't know much about them, but I will say I did spoil like the true first experience of hands-on with the JZ because I was there when Jay took apart Adam's 2JZ. So I was around for the taking apart part of the process, and now I'm going to be learning all new things today and putting together my actual FD engine. So I am pumped. Jay is one of the best in the business when it comes to this stuff, and the only reason why this was possible as well, in addition to having Jay and RS Garage nearby, was from Brian Crower's support. So we're going to have the best BC parts going in to this engine, and I'm so excited. So let's head on in. We're here with Jay from RS Garage. We are at RS Garage, and I'm so excited to learn everything there is to know about 2JZ assembly today.
I don't know that we'll get everything in one session. But,
yeah, you did say it could be weeks. If we
takes
really
a
went
minute.
into depth about everything, we're gonna get a nice broad overview.
Yeah.
So going into FD, we really don't know what's in my current engine, so we want to have a platform that we know every single thing about it, and I'm super pumped to be working with Brian Crower as well to make this possible with all their parts. So if anything, why don't we just kick it off talking about what makes this engine so special?
If you move past the blessings of Toyota good architecture and you move into aftermarket parts, BC crank, it's a stroker crank, so it's going to move the piston further up and down the bore and increases the displacement of the engine. And generally when you add stroke to an engine, you're adding leverage, you're adding torque, which is going to help dig this thing out of a corner sideways and make more power. And when Brian Crower started, it was a spin out of the original Crower company, which is like one of the grandfather American names of speed, period. Brian finds some high-level guys. They make these gorgeous cranks. This is a lightweight version, so there's about 7 hours of additional machining that go into all of the dressings on this crank, and also a set of titanium connecting rods with ARP rod bolts and a set of CP pistons.
And what's the weight difference? So if I just starting with the crank, because this is a lightweight one, what's the weight difference?
It's 12 pounds between the two. And if you kind of examine, first off, this crankshaft has a hole drilled right through the back, and it goes all the way down the middle. So this is hollow in the middle. It's called rifle drilled.
All the way through.
Where this one isn't. And then you have these pockets around the rod journals, and then you have all this additional kind of scalloping of material out around the counterweights and just filing away of metal, chip at a time until you get to the 12-pound mark.
And I will say, like, a big decision before going into this that I had to make was, am I staying 3-liter or are we going 3.4? Because going 3.4, there's a lot more machining. Parts are more expensive. There's more things you have to do. I know that we have an FD program, engine program blueprint to follow with Adam's program.
Yep.
And these parts have been tested before. The only thing that we're doing differently, that Adam is also doing differently this year, is throwing in some titanium rods. So that is the only thing that we haven't yet incorporated into the program. But I really, really wanted to do 3.4. I really wanted that extra like punch and that mid-range.
They drive well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've never even driven one. You know that, right? I've never driven Adams. So I am just full believing, but it can only be better. Would you say this is one of the more expensive parts in jumping to a 3.4?
Yeah, but it doesn't mean it's not critical, because if you buy a lesser quality crank and you get into stacking tolerances on even something as simple as getting the bearing clearance right, like there's variations, and you want to have all those variations inside of a half a thousandth of an inch.
Yeah.
If you get a poorly machined crank and you have to try to accommodate that in your bearing clearance, because your 0.02 of distance between the bearing and the crank, if this isn't round, You could have 3,000ths in some places or 1,000ths in other places.
Yeah.
So the holding tolerance when you go through machining on these parts, it's kind of what separates the boys from the men in good finished quality parts. So you can source a lower cost stroker crank, but if you get into a lower cost stroker crank and it doesn't live and it loses bearings, well, that 46 or 4,800 bucks it would have cost to just buy the right part, you wish you spent it because now your car's broken.
Yeah.
You're not playing with it and you got to fix it.
Yep.
So there's some things that you shouldn't skimp on.
This being one of them. This is a very, very big part of the formula here. So big shout out. Thank you to Brian Crowder, BC team for helping source all these parts to make my 3.4 dreams come true. And it's kind of crazy though, for my first JZ that we're building as a 3.4.
Well,
Like, I feel like I'm getting a little spoiled here, just going
you're
straight to
spoiled
like the
rotten,
tippy
for
top
sure.
to the good stuff, but I'm excited to learn. The weight difference on these.
You'll go from like around 650 grams to around 480 grams.
Okay.
And that weight, you know, the weight that's inside of an engine is spinning round and round or going up and down, to put it basic. And it has to manage a tremendous amount of stress and a tremendous amount of vibration as rev limiters and misfires and detonation and all that stuff is happening. So you get into all of the abuse that an engine has to live with, and the components just have to be right. The further you put that piston away from this pin,
Heavier.
and the higher speed, it's mind-boggling when you start to do the math. Like, I think if a lot of drifters knew the math of what happens inside of the engine, they wouldn't just be laying it on the rev limiter the same, because it's tough life. That's the difference between a white box company and a company that's working with racers, is they're actually making sure the parts are up to snuff. And
then you spec'd out pistons with BC, right?
Yep.
So what are we working with here?
10-to-1 compression. So with a stroker piston, the center line of the pin and the top of the piston, that's your compression height. And you move that up. That's why there's only a small amount of material here versus a stock piston, which we can stick in a clip, that the pin is moved down. So CP goes through great lengths with their parts. There's different ways to hold a part as you machine it, and there's different times to do different machining operations. So the order in which this groove is put, and this notch is put, and this pinhole is put, and this is finished, all that matters. And CP has mastered the craft. You know, there's a lot of great pistons on the market. You know, CP, they're just kind of my go-to brand. Like the finish work on this edge, like it's already kindly radius, because when the piston goes down and it has to make its way back up, the rod kind of want to pushes it that way, and you can get into some rocking. And they just have all these gorgeous radiuses on the parts. This is a nice part. Yeah, it's just, this is a lot of the nicest stuff you can buy.
We're doing it.
Yeah.
We're doing it big. We're in FD now, y'all. We got to step it up. So those are our pistons, and then we have some, RS Garage.
Main caps. So
caps over here. Very
JZ's,
nice.
There was never really a hard answer, but people will go on the internet and say, like, I've got the highest horsepower stock block engine, then it will break a main cap. So if you're building a JZ that's going to make over, say, 1,000 horsepower, you just put main caps on it. Because the cost to put main caps on it during the machining process, during the build process, is far less than having an engine that's not main capped and having to go back and do it.
Cool.
Cool.
Well,
Okay.
I think that's kind of the main parts and points we wanted to hit on. So I'm going to help where I can. I think for the most part, just going to be learning and watching what you do. I'm here. I'm ready. Let's go.
All right.
I've only been promoted to oiler so far.
I'm going to drop the crank in. When I drop the crank in, I drop it in with counterweight and rod journal kind of horizontal right here.
Okay.
Because I'm going to fish my thrust washers in and not have to turn the crank. But when you lower the crank in, you want to be careful to not beat it around on stuff. So you just slowly, 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 boop. If it doesn't make any clunks and bangs on the way in, it means you didn't hit stuff. Then you have your two upper thrust washers, because the engine's upside down. So we can lubricate the face of the thrust washer, fish it in, channel your inner Bob Ross. You're not trying to drench the thing in it.
You're too fast.
Huh?
You're too fast.
we're gonna go over how the caps go in the block, because that's important.
You have to tighten them in a certain way, right?
Yeah, we work them into the saddle evenly because there's interference fit between the cap and the block. So you want to respect that as it makes its way from floating on the studs to entering the saddle. Part of the relationship between the cap and the block is making sure it has the right amount of preload or force. This is thousandths of an inch larger than the entry.
To
So
get that,
to get it to hold in place. It's
Yeah.
how the cap is located. The caps have an orientation in both number and front to rear, and all caps, rod caps and main caps, are all going to be that way. You can't mix caps up. They all need to go in their prescribed home. Get my thrust bearing and its partner bearing, and then I'll hold the bearings by these little tangs, and because I've got the crankshaft out of the way, slide that down, and I hold the bearings with my fingertips as it goes down, because the bearing can fall out of place, and if you're not careful or not experienced, you'll start tightening that cap down and you'll bend the bearing up, and then the crank doesn't turn, and you've got to oh, something's wrong. So
Yeah.
you just it's a lot of game of careful. You see you're working the cap down into the block. So the thrust, I'll tighten it down and then I'll loosen it back up, because I'm still gonna bang the crank back and forth to get it seated. With different engine builders, everybody kind of has their own habit.
Yeah.
And it's like sock, shoe, sock, shoe, shoe. Like, try to change the order, and some people just can't change the order. So
Wait, what? Do you put your sock on and then your shoe with your bare foot just chilling, and then you move on to the sock and shoe of the other foot?
I'm not saying that's what I do. I'm just saying some people do it that way.
That is some psychopath stuff. You're just chilling, this bare foot just out in the wind, while this other one has a full shoe on it. That's crazy. I've never heard of that.
They're out there.
Wow.
They're among us.
Comment below. Is that you?
Yeah, you have to do a survey. Are you a sock, shoe guy, or a sock, shoe?
I didn't even
guy?
think there was another way. It's sock, then shoe.
But that, to my point, that's exactly how some people feel about engine building.
So in total,
Yeah.
how long would you say the full process is?
It's a good day's work if you've mocked everything up the day before.
Yeah, because a lot of the time-consuming stuff, the measuring, the clearancing, that's already, we're not even
already done.
taking that into account.
Right.
So it's a full day of just assembly.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna find out.
That's why I can't wait. I want to be there. I've told him when he goes and builds a rotary for the first time, I want to go and also be there.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if we say it's the same point, right? Parts are, everything's machined, cleaned, clearanced, ready to go. All the side seals, everything's been measured, done. You're probably talking half hour to an hour.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Just boom, stack it. And we do it on top of a bucket sometimes, you know? So it's a pretty big difference. But honestly, that was one of the biggest things that when I first had to pick a platform to start with, that's why I chose the rotary, because I didn't know how to build engines on my own. And I'm like, well, less parts, less time, even though they're finicky, I know. But my reasoning was like, less things, less parts. This is something that I could try and grasp, like me when I'm 17. Okay. Like if I had to do something on my own, there's just way less things. Obviously, there's a lot more complexities too. So.
I never thought about it that way. I always identify it very much with culture. You got a bunch of white dudes in the Midwest messing with V8 engines, and you got a large amount of Puerto Ricans on the island messing with rotaries, and you got Australians messing with rotaries.
Yeah.
But valve train on its own is a large pill to swallow, especially on a pushrod engine.
Yep.
So I never thought of the rotary from the simplicity of being the attraction. Less parts, less things. Yeah.
Especially if like I'm on my own. I hadn't even built a car at this point. My first car was an RX-8. And I didn't really get an RX-8 because of the rotary, but I'm half Puerto Rican, so it's also in my blood. So I had no choice. And I didn't know that rotaries were a Puerto Rican thing until years later. Like I had owned the RX-8 for a while now. Like just topping off oil was just normal. And then I ended up choosing the RX-7 platform because engine, but also it's in my blood. I didn't have a choice.
You didn't have a choice. So, the rotary chose you.
Yep. I didn't choose this life. It was thrust upon me. Okay, so what is that? What do you?
This is just automatic transmission fluid.
Oh, ATM.
And we're going to get that there was assembly lube goo coming off the crank, coming up the cylinders, and we're going to wipe all that out. And also, inside of this bore finish is thousands of little places for things to be. And it's been washed and washed and washed.
You can see the little marks.
You're wiping the ATF and kind of rubbing it into all those little crevices before you put the pistons in. And you also have an opportunity to clean out anything that's in there, because the bores will start rusting very quickly. If you feel this edge, it's pretty smooth. So as I'm cleaning the engine, I'll take a piece of like 600 grit sandpaper and I'll just finger around that edge and get it to where it doesn't cut my hands as I'm doing this. Because if you're doing this and the edge is sharp, you'll be bleeding all over the place.
So there's like the tiniest little.
It's tiny,
little
isn't it?
nit, can't see on here, on the other side of the rod. And he noticed when I was putting this in that there was like a slight bit of friction that didn't seem normal, even just watching me. So he's like, I'm gonna double check that. And there was like a little tiny nick that caused enough friction to make this hesitate a bit. So he's gonna sand that part down.
Once we get this on, the head goes on. I think that we'll probably come real close to finishing today, which is a good day.
Yay. Oh, there's so many like little intricate details that even just, it's hard to explain, but even him visually watching me do something, he knew something wasn't 100% right, which is just like, which is crazy. So there's so much more than just putting parts together, and even like measuring tolerances or knowing tolerances, and even like feeling, okay, that feels right. That's one of my biggest pet peeves, is if someone is like, you just gotta feel it. If anyone ever says that, just my brain is like, well, what do you mean? I'm warming up my thumbs over here.
Yeah, you may not have the thumb for this.
I might not. We'll see, I guess. How dramatically would it feel?
No forcing.
Okay.
Let it float.
I think that's it.
Okay. Now, time for the thumbs.
Wait, how you feel? Do a feel check. Make sure it's right before the thumbs.
Oh, if you get it wrong, it's just gonna stop.
Okay.
All right, thumbs.
All right.
Quick.
Thumbs, just like.
Quick.
Was I not quick enough?
You got it on the first try.
Did I?
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it's actually in.
Oh, it's in.
Okay. Thanks. It's very scary. Like, how do I even? My whole hand can't even.
We have little hands, so that doesn't help you.
Widow hands.
Three, two, one. Ready, steady, go.
I've never seen an engine like this.
It's a lot of fresh stuff. Number
Stressful.
4. Number 4 is loaded.
So that's time on the bottom end. That's time. Bottom end.
Yeah.
Done.
Bottom end's done.
Complete. Yeah.
The cylinder head, these are a bunch of BC valves. It's a CNC ported GE VVTi head. And my buddies over at ACH CNC port, camo clearance, Kelford buckets, full BC valve train, and with some BC 272 cams. So it should be a good runner. We're going to hold the head down with ARP 625 head stud kit. You can start threading the nuts onto the broached end of the stud. From the top, you gotta get it from the top. There you go. Yeah, see?
Okay. Yeah. Oh, this is nice.
Yeah, it's like one of my favorite tools.
BC cams, baby. Jay has officially built my absolute dream engine, and I am freaking pumped. I still think it's a little crazy that I've never driven one before, but I've just heard how incredible they are, and this was absolutely the goal for the FD car. So thank you, Jay, for making it happen. Like, between Jay, BC coming on, and Freddy, everyone getting together and making a plan for this, made the blueprint, now executed, and I still can't believe I'm gonna have like the craziest engine in my FD car. So thanks, Jay.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that between the LZ team and Freddy and myself and major help like BC, you guys are positioning yourselves well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.